guys, thank you so much for joining us. I am so excited to be back here at the room and really excited to have all of you together. Tonight, again, we're going to be making the Southwestern Power Bowl, and we're going to be using a couple of my favorite ingredients. Of course, if you're cooking along and you have any questions, don't hesitate to chime in, and then if you follow up and watch the video later, of course, you can always reach out and get some extra assistance or help with questions. So we're going to get started, and I don't know if you have much experience with plant-based alternatives, but we're fortunate enough to have a ton of options on the market these days. And so I was just going to highlight a couple of really great, quick, and easy plant-based alternatives to begin with. This is like a ready-to-go jackfruit. You can heat it and throw it on top of so many different options. This is their barbecue version, but there are a myriad of other available flavors. But it does use jackfruit. But of course, as always, check the ingredients, because one of the areas in NatPacks that we specialize is allergy-friendly items. And some of our alternatives include things like soy or wheat. And so if you have an allergy, you definitely want to keep your eyes on these labels. If you're new and navigating the plant-based alternatives, you can always reach out with questions. But here's another one of my favorites. This one, it says lightly seasoned, but it's very similar to a pulled plain chicken, and it'll absorb just about any flavor that you put it with. So it's a nice versatile option if you're looking for a plant-based meat alternative. But again, check the back for my folks with allergies or food sensitivities. And then here is a baked tofu. I really like these versions because they're nice and firm. They're going to be less water absorbent, and they're going to give you that nice, like, hearty, firm tofu flavor and texture. This is their teriyaki version. Of course, you can go with any of the options, but these are some of the ones that I kind of keep on hand. And then tonight, I'm going to be using this organic super firm. Again, I prefer the firm tofu. It has a better texture, and it's easier to get that nice, like, crispy consistency to add to any dish. So we're going to start here. I've already strained and rinsed my beans. You're going to use 1 can of kidney and 1 can of black beans. And then we're going to dice and saute an onion and add that all together. So we'll just go ahead and get started. If at any time anyone has any questions, do not hesitate to chime in or use the raise hand feature, and we'll be glad to help. Of course, as always, if there's any issues with audio or video, just pop in and let me know, okay, guys? I'm assuming y'all can all see me.
Yeah, looks great, Natalie. We'll let you know.
Perfect. So who has ever chopped an onion and you like have this skin on the outside and you're like, it makes a mess and it's terrible? Well, here's one of my secrets. So I use a little sheet of paper or towel, and I start by cutting the ends. Cut both ends. I'm gonna get a bigger knife. And then I cut vertically down the side, and I peel that first layer off entirely, and I just do that over top of my paper towel so that I don't get any skin mixed in or stuck to my cutting board. And then I just toss that. It makes getting an onion ready a lot easier because that skin will kind of flake off and get included in your diced or chopped onion, and it's not very appetizing. So here's what I got. The top's off, the bottom's off, and then I've got the skin on the outside off as well. So I'm gonna start by cutting that in half. We're only gonna need half of a red onion for this recipe, so I'll store the other half, and it's great for things like omelets. You can add it to pasta dishes or any type of stir fry that you might be doing as well. Okay. Gonna go down this red onion. Who's cooking with me tonight?
Margie, are you cooking with us tonight? She is. I knew it. You can always count on her. Who else? Who else is cooking? We want to know.
All right, so I just did a quick little chop on that red onion, only half, and then I'm gonna put about 3 tablespoons of olive oil in my medium saucepan and turn the heat up to a medium high. All right, and once that's good warm, I'm gonna add that in, give it a stir, add in the garlic and seasonings, and then we're gonna add in our strained beans. So while that's getting good and warm, I'm gonna go ahead and kind of talk y'all guys through the tofu. So tofu, if you are using the extra firm, it's great because it can hold a lot of water, but the key to getting a nice crispy tofu is to get as much of that water out as possible. So we're gonna open this up. We're gonna place it between some paper towels and we're gonna give it a good squeeze before we cut it. So I'm gonna get started there. Oftentimes I'll cut this over the sink just because these packages of tofu do contain a lot of water. So now that I have that packaging open and I went ahead and drained off some of the moisture that immediately comes out. Oh my God. Sometimes these packaging are a little tricky to get open. But here we have that nice firm block of tofu. And as you can see, like if I give this a squeeze, you're gonna get a lot of moisture out of it. So I've got 2 paper towels on the bottom, and then I've got 2 paper towels on the top, and I'm just gonna press it and try to absorb as much of that moisture as possible. I'll even turn it to the side, give it a good press. When you're using the extra firm tofu, it has less of a tendency to fall apart and makes it quite a bit easier to get the really nice texture. All right, so our pan with the olive oil is nice and warm. I'm gonna go ahead and add in the red onion that we just kind of coarse chopped. And then here I've got the garlic, so I'm gonna add that in as well. Again, I'm using the extra firm organic tofu.
Natalie, we've got a question about if you don't use the whole block of tofu, can you, when you store it, does it need to be stored in that water it came in, or would you recommend cooking it all up and storing it once it's cooked?
So there are a few options there. If I only wanted to use half of this, which I may do tonight, I'm gonna cut it in half. I'm gonna wrap it in paper towels, and then I'm gonna put it in a Ziploc bag or a pretty airtight container and put the other half in the refrigerator. And that's plenty sufficient. Because it is so absorbent, it's gonna hold on to some moisture, and you do not need to worry too much with it drying out. I prefer a drier tofu because you're going to be able to get it nice and crispy. You're going to get that nice texture. All right, so I'm going to give this tofu a cut. Because it's a pretty thick block, I'm going to start by going through this way. And this is what I would kind of set aside if I'm not going to need it. And then we're going to cut the tofu in nice little 1-inch sections. So I think this block of tofu, it is identified as 5 servings, which seems pretty fair. Some of the smaller blocks will be 2. Our onion is starting to get nice and caramelized. So I'm going to go ahead, this other half of the tofu, I'm going to go ahead and set that aside to save for later. And in the same container, I'm going to take the tofu that I've pressed and cut, and I'm going to put that in there. And that's where we're going to use the dry ingredients to go ahead and kind of pre-season the tofu before we get started in the pan. I've got the paprika, garlic powder, onion powder combination. You'll see that a couple times in this recipe. We're really just continuing to reincorporate that. From a flavor perspective, it's fairly simple, but we're going to be picking up a lot of different textures between the tofu itself, the beans, the avocados, the greens, the corn, the mushrooms. You're going to get a lot of different textures. And so that's really going to add to the interest and the variety of the fish. For my individuals and for clients at NatPacks that aren't fans of plant-based alternatives, either because of the allergy perspective, we substitute really big mushrooms. And so a lot of times we'll use these. They're nice and firm, and they provide a lot of texture and a lot of interest to a dish that otherwise would include meat. So my onion and garlic is nice and caramelized. I'm going to go ahead and turn that heat back a little bit and add in my beans as well as the chicken stock. So here we've got 1 can of organic black beans, 1 can of organic kidney beans. I typically opt for the low sodium option just because for me that's always a concern. We can add it, but we can't take it away. I'm gonna give that a good stir. I'm gonna add in 1 cup of organic low sodium stock, and we'll put that back on the heat. How's everybody doing? Everybody good?
Looks great, Natalie. We're just going
Awesome.
along.
So I'm just gonna rub this seasoning mixture over the tofu. So once I get that on there well, I'm going to go wash my hands. All right. So I'm gonna go ahead and put in about 2 tablespoons of olive oil into my large frying pan. Again, I love this little olive oil container because it allows me to measure out and be conscious of how much olive oil I'm using throughout the cooking process. Olive oil is a good, clean, healthy fat. However, we still want to be conscious of what our consumption is and how much we use. So I'm going to start out on a medium-high heat and get that pan nice and warm before I put the tofu in. While that pan is heating up, I always have a tendency to do a little pre-cleaning. So if you see me dancing around the kitchen, Usually I'm grabbing something or getting something ready for my next step, and I'm always glad to help if you have questions. So I went ahead and diced one jalapeno, which if you like things a little bit spicy, you could add this in with the beans, or you can use this on top as a garnish, but now's a good time while you're kind of waiting on the beans to work their magic and getting your pan good and ready for the tofu to do any additional chopping. I did go ahead and buy pre-washed mushrooms and pre-sliced mushrooms. They are organic, just to make things a little bit easier. But again, if you didn't buy those items ready to go, now's a good time to kind of do any chopping that you may need. I'm gonna give these beans a stir. So with the tofu, I am going to be a little bit particular about how I put it in the pan. I really do want to make sure I get a nice good sear on the tofu. So I'm going to use a set of tongs rather than just dumping it in. If you love a super crispy tofu, you can always use a little bit of cornstarch or cornmeal on the outside and do kind of a pan fry to get that extra crispiness. All right. Who's cooking tofu with me?
Looks like some of us are familiar with tofu and some have only had it in things like Chinese soup. Yeah, Sonia, like miso soup. So for some, it's a little more unfamiliar. So I think this is a great starter recipe for tofu if it is unfamiliar for you, because it's going to be super flavorful and the other flavors are going to be familiar with that like kind of Southwestern flair.
Yes, absolutely. And you can always substitute here and go for chicken or go just with the mushrooms and the beans. You're going to get a ton of variety and texture with those two options. And if tofu is an allergy or a trigger for you from a dietary perspective, we can skip it and find something else that works well. I'm watching the time over here and also keeping a peek on my tofu. Because the tofu contains a lot of moisture, you don't want to cook it too high and too fast, but you also want to give it enough heat to where it will go ahead and sear. Just a little bit longer and it'll be ready to flip. My beans are at a low simmer, and so I'm going to keep an eye on them while we're doing these other items, give them a good stir from time to time. Because we added the chicken stock along with chili, paprika, garlic, the diced onions that were sauteed, we're going to get a ton of flavor from the beans alone. And the mushrooms are going to be a really great addition from a flavor perspective. So for the bowl, for the Southwestern bowl, I picked up Baby Kale. They have a pretty stemmy leaf and they're small, but they're also still tender and delicate. It's a great option for any types of bowls, stir fries, or just salads in general. I really find that the Baby Kale is a nice, delicate flavor and delicate leaf, so it's very versatile. We're getting close, y'all.
Natalie, we do have someone on with a soy sensitivity, so I'm glad you've touched on that quite a bit. And also, we had a question about any specific tofu brand you would recommend. I have never had it, from Rosie.
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Any specific tofu brand that you would recommend for someone that's never tried it?
Yes, so I'm not 100% positive how to say this. Maybe one day I'll figure it out for sure. But it's the soya, I believe that's how it's pronounced. And they make the baked version, which is a little bit thinner. This one is 2 servings, whereas that big block I had earlier is also made by the same company, but it's a much bigger block and it's 5 servings. So different, similar brand, similar company, or same brand, same company, similar but different products. I really do like that brand in particular. But again, I typically venture more toward the firm and extra firm options. So if you can see, our tofu is starting to get a little crispy on the bottom side. We have a little bit of browning going on. So I'm going to go ahead and say that this is ready to flip. Of course, your pan and your heat source will play a part on getting that tofu nice and brown and nice and crispy. So I like to turn each individual piece of tofu so that I can make sure all sides are cooked evenly and consistently. It's starting to smell really good in here. I'm going to turn my beans down a tiny bit. How are we doing over there? So the max time on our tofu is about 10 to 12 minutes. So because we've got 4 sides to a cube, usually I try to break that up, but I also try to watch for browning too quickly. I can adjust the heat. If it looks really dry, we can add a little bit more oil. But about 10 to 12 minutes is your max for most of those tofu that are cut into the cubes. And then our beans are working their magic. So while this is cooking, now I'm going to go ahead and get things like my avocado ready for when we do start plating. So for the avocado, you can mash it, you can mix it, you can slice it or chop it, whatever works best for you. We're throwing it on the bowl and we're probably going to eat it all together, so it doesn't have to be glamorous. Also too, I don't know if you've ever tried to slice a super firm avocado. It doesn't always turn out pretty. So a lot of times I'll just scoop it out. But again, we're going to cut the skin, slice down the center, then we're going to take that seed out. All right, my tofu is starting to look really nice and brown on the other side as well. So I just give it a little bit of stir, turn the heat down a tiny bit, and give it a few more minutes. So I'm just going to break this avocado up with a spoon a little bit. It is really, really super soft, nice and ripe. So if I try to cut it, it's going to be a mess. gonna actually go ahead and do 2 avocados. How's everyone doing?
Looks great, Natalie. Everybody's doing good.
Awesome. Now's a great time to chime in if y'all guys have any questions or you want to say hello. For any of my NatPacks people out there, I'm so grateful to have you here. If you ever have any questions about NatPacks or kind of what I do and how I can serve the community, please don't hesitate to reach out, follow along on social media. All right, our tofu is looking really close to being done, so I'm going to go ahead and reduce that heat. And I'm going to get a bowl to put that into while we cook the mushrooms and then cook the corn and put it all together. All right, so my pan is still good and warm. I'm going to set this aside. I'm going to get the mushrooms ready. Here I'm going to add another good serving of the olive oil. And that's pretty much ready to go ahead and put the mushrooms in. So for the mushrooms, we want high heat very quick. If you cook mushrooms at a low temperature for too long, they're going to end up being kind of soggy. We want these bad boys to be more firm and more almost kind of charred. So high heat, short time. So once our pan is back up to tip, we're going to go ahead and add these in, add in some seasonings, give them a quick stir around, and then we're going to transfer them in and get ready to do our corn. Everybody still with me?
Yeah, we're having a conversation about avocado pits over here. Yeah, the best way to get them out.
About avocado pits?
Yeah.
So, for me, once I cut the skin all the way through, I give it a little twist, and then I take a nice little sharp knife. Of course, do this with caution, y'all. Avocados can be kind of like tricky and dangerous, but I go straight for the seed, pop my knife in there, give it a counter twist, and then your avocado seed should be kind of stuck on the knife, and you can just flick it or toss it into the trash can. So here, I've got the mushrooms going. I'm going to add in my chili and garlic. I'm going to lay these nice and flat so that they all get even heat and they get a little bit of that char we were talking about. So chili mushrooms are probably one of my favorite things. They're a tiny bit spicy, but they're so good and they add so much flavor. I'm going to add a teeny bit more olive oil. I'm listening for like a really nice sizzle with those mushrooms. And then I'm going to go ahead and add in a little bit of the diced jalapenos to my black beans. I like a little bit of heat, especially with a bowl like this. You really want those flavors to kind of be diverse, but also interesting. So the little bit of fresh jalapeno not only adds texture and interest, but also flavor. There's the sizzle. So I'm going to go ahead and give these mushrooms a turn. I'm going to kind of turn each one by one. They're starting to develop a nice color on the side that was heat down. And that's what we want to see. We want them a little charred, cooked hot and quick. Here's a great example. Can y'all guys see that? It's still firm, but it's got nice color. So again, I still have the heat on high, and we're just gonna let these mushrooms cook for another minute or two. How's everybody doing?
Looks delicious, Natalie.
Has anyone ever used the baby back toy before?
Yeah, we've got a few people who have.
Awesome. Can y'all guys see that? That mushroom is starting to develop a nice color, but it's still pretty firm. And because we're cooking it at a pretty high temperature, we're removing a lot of the excess moisture from it pretty quickly. So we'll get a nice browning on the mushroom. And I just went ahead and tried a piece of the tofu. It's still nice and warm. It has a nice crispy texture on the outside, but still very tender on the inside.
Yeah, the mushrooms look great, Natalie. We had a question, is baby spinach a good substitute for the bok choy, or what other substitutes would you recommend?
Oh, absolutely. Baby spinach, baby kale, even chopped kale, purple cabbage would be a good option here as well. Anything that's going to give you that texture, variety, and interest of flavor. So my mushrooms are pretty much done. Here's what they look like. They're nice and kind of slightly brown. So I'm gonna go ahead and add them into the pan beside my tofu. And then in that same hot pan, I'm gonna add a little bit more olive oil and go ahead and cook that corn. So the corn we can also cook on a pretty high heat, and we want those like pan drippings or fond to be incorporated. And so I'm gonna leave the heat up pretty high for this. When I add in this corn, we're gonna get a nice little pop. And here's where we're gonna add in the juice of our lime, some garlic. Again, we're using a pretty high heat, and we're gonna cook these pretty quickly. Additional seasoning. Once that first stage of water is absorbed, it'll stop popping and hissing quite as much. Y'all still with me?
Yep, looking good. I bet it smells amazing.
Yay! Yeah, so it smells really, really great. All right, so while we've got the corn still in here, it's working its magic. I'm gonna go ahead and start loading up my bowl so we can take the beans and remove them from the heat. Y'all, these look so good. This is a great place too to add in like brown rice or even tricolored quinoa, just to add more depth to the plate. But here I've got my cooked beans, a little bit of jalapeno, a little bit of chopped red onion. The onion is kind of dissolved a little bit, so you still get those peaks of the jalapeno. So I'm just gonna start by layering that over top of my bok choy. Oh, y'all, this corn smells so good. And then my corn is pretty much done. It's nice and heated. The flavors are all really greatly integrated. So I'm gonna go ahead and layer over some corn as well. And then add in our mushrooms. Some of our tofu. And then I'm gonna top it off with some freshly diced jalapenos and some of our avocados. I just kind of coarsely mashed these. They were extremely ripe, so getting really nice pretty slices would be kind of hard. So I'm just gonna dollop that on top and add in some cilantro. Y'all, this looks so good. Woo, I about lost my dinner, y'all.
Beautiful, looks so good, all those colors and flavors.
Yes, oh my goodness. Have any of you ever used a mushroom like that for a Southwestern style dish?
What kind of mushroom was it again, Natalie? I love mushrooms.
So those were sliced portobellos. So as you can see, they were pretty large, but when you're cooking them on that high heat pretty quickly, you get a nice firm texture. And so for me, that's one of my favorite ways to make them. And I like them kind of spicy. So smoked paprika, chili powder, those are great options for sauteing mushrooms at a high heat. Does anyone have questions?
I'm not seeing any other questions coming through. But thank you so much, Natalie. I think we do have one. Let's see. Go ahead, Marjorie.
Thanks, Kate. Nat, you gave the best idea last week when we had the leftovers and we used them cold and like added the cucumber and tomato and things like that. And I did that for the one little serving I had left. It was so good. I just wondered for this week if you had any tips.
Yes, absolutely. So the extra corn and the beans, you can do the exact same thing. So you can almost make a Southwestern salad or relish. You can add in jalapenos, you can add in fresh diced onion, you can add in cilantro, and you can mix it all together with a good serving of olive oil to keep it nice and hydrated, and use that as a topping for either salads or for tacos. And it'll go a long way.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Another great option is you could even incorporate the corn and the beans and kind of transition these items into a soup or into like a Southwestern style chili.
Great ideas.
Yeah, those all sound delicious. Love it. Anybody else have questions or comments? Rosie said it looks delicious. She can't wait to try it. Lisa said, what a great meal for a warm day, healthy with a good protein.
Mm-hmm. I'm absolutely loving it.
Well, thank you all so much for joining us. Give this dish a try if you're watching or just viewing tonight. All those delicious vegetables, nice balanced meal. Give tofu a try. Sherilyn said, I've learned so much about tofu. It's really not as scary as you think. You just got to dive in and try it the first time and be willing to experiment. Rosalind's planning on trying this. So thank you all. Hope you have fun enjoying this recipe. And we'll be back again next week.
Bye, guys. See you soon.